Welcome, everybody, to another edition of The Word on Woodward. I'm Daniella Bruce alongside Art Regner, and joining us today, a very special guest, your new Red Wings head coach, Lalonde. Now, Derek, the past couple of weeks, you've been on quite the media tour, so we are excited that you made some time for us today.
Yeah, it's been a lot, but that's a good sign, right? People want to hear what we're about and what we got going on here. So, yes, it's been a lot. It's been too much TV, though. My wife's told me radio suits me much better. I don't know what she means by that, but in front of the camera again
tell
today.
her that you're the third best looking
I am.
head coach?
It's exhausting. It's a lot of work being the third best looking coach in the National Hockey League.
Yeah.
What have you learned? I guess, obviously you've been in the league, with Tampa, and it's been well documented. You've been in hockey a long time, but because there seems to be such a demand for your time, have you learned something about what it means to be the head coach of the Detroit Red Wings, about this storied franchise?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the very first media scrum, if you will, I had was via Zoom in Traverse City. And I did a lot of the video. I did a lot of the media in Tampa when Coop either didn't want to do it or wasn't available. Derek will do it. I'll throw some cliches out. I'll be in and out, and they'd be happy. In Tampa, there'd be 3 people. 2 of them worked for us. Like, that would be a typical media day. And I was overwhelmed by the media there. And basically, I'm no longer in Tampa here. So it's like anything else. You grow up. Where I grew up, hockey is a big part of my life. Growing up in upstate New York, hockey is a big part of the community. You know what the Red Wings are about. It's just such a storied franchise. But then actually being in part of it, you even get more of an appreciation of what it's about.
So from what we see in the media, it looks like you're adjusting very well, but you've talked about it before, how different it is being a head coach in the NHL opposed to an assistant coach. How are you adjusting behind the scenes?
Good. I mean, there's a reality to that. I think the one thing as on the coaching side of it is just it's a different level of accountability. I've always had success with relationships with players. My role in Tampa was a little bit different. We had a little of the good cop, bad cop going, in that, I was there to pick up some guys at times. Here, just the reality, I think, of being the head coach is you got to hold the guys accountable. And I think even the guys were probably taking back a little bit of probably what the perception of what they've heard about me. And I'm sure it was hopefully mostly positive, but some of those previous relationships I had in Tampa to how it has to be and how it has to look on a sense of accountability. So that's a little bit different. I really appreciate now those 7 years I had as a head coach prior to spending the 4 years as an assistant, because it's a different approach when you're the head coach as opposed to the assistant.
Now you're heading into your first week as an NHL head coach, and obviously camp just wrapped up. You've got your 23-man roster set. Can you go back to camp for us and tell us what maybe you were surprised about, both positively and negatively? Were there any major takeaways for you from what you experienced through camp?
I think positively, buy-in from the guys, and immediately. New structure, new system. Some of those very first meetings probably looked a little foreign to the guys, but they immediately translated either what we were working on in practice or in the red-white game or in our next game. So that was a very good sign going forward, and that the guys were locked in, they were dialed, they were paying attention. So there were some positives in there. I got to caution myself on the negatives, probably some of the outcomes. Yeah. Obviously, it's the exhibition. You don't really concern yourself with wins and losses, but with that said, the guys did the things we asked of them in a lot of those situations. The process was good. Unfortunately, we didn't get the outcome. I look back at that Pittsburgh game at home, and we ended up losing 3-2. We played an excellent hockey game. Analytically, we want to look back on that, and we would have outchanced them 2-1. We would have outplayed them in every situation. Most times than not, that's a win. So when the guys do the process correctly, you want them to get rewarded. Now, I think over time it plays itself out that they will get rewarded. So I've been very happy with the process, especially in camp. Some of the things we've tried to implement. Our team defense, there's an effort to it. Our ability to get above pucks and be outnumbered. I think you guys even you've seen plenty of hockey. Yeah. You've seen this team last year. We weren't giving up that egregious odd man after odd man or spending a lot of time in our zone. Again, it's just the exhibition. A little bit probably is competition, but we did improve in some of those areas, and those numbers would prove themselves out in those 8 games. We gave up 1.9 goals against on 5-on-5 playing those 8 games. If we continue to do that, we're going to have some success this year.
And just maybe negative is the wrong word, but obviously there's going to be those types of challenges,
Of course, yes, 100%.
I have to ask you a question that I noticed in the room, since we're back in there now, which is great, is that there seems to be 2 words that are in that locker room that I had not seen until this year. One's attitude up top, and then it's where the Red Wings would walk out onto the ice. It's right in the room there. And the other one is why. Can you explain exactly what you did, why you put those up there?
Yeah, those were 2. As a staff, we talked about, what can be different. The new staff coming in, what can you have for a little change, at the same time getting our point across, what we're trying to do, and we came up with those 2 words, and they're fairly broad on purpose, but they can be very specific also. And a lot of times, and we discuss it, we'll reference those throughout camp. We're going to reference them throughout the entire year. Your attitude. What is your attitude as an individual that day? What is your attitude as a team? What's your attitude when we face adversity? What's your attitude when a team wants to push us around? What's your attitude when we're down a goal going in third? So I think that's something you can reference on a big picture and on an individual picture too. And the guys have had some great buy-in with that. We've actually referenced them. Now I hear them talking like that, using those exact words. Why? What's your why for the day? What's your why for a team? Those are purposely broad, but we can be very specific with them at times. So we're still referencing those words a lot in camp, and that's something we're going to talk about throughout the entire year.
You've talked a lot about, too, how obviously you've got the buy-in, right? You like what you're seeing from the buy-in side of things, but to make this team take the next step, you're going to have to get some of the young guys to take that natural next step in their games, right? And I'm specifically thinking like Michael Rasmussen, Philip Zadina, Joe Veleno, those types of players. And specifically maybe with those 3, how have you seen their roles progress? And I know that Joe Veleno, Philip Zadina were the odd men out, so to speak, the 13th and 14th at practice not too long ago. So what do you see their future looking like, and how do you see them progressing this season?
Well, I'd put, you mentioned those 3. There's probably 8 or 9 guys in reality, maybe all of our guys that they're just, any good player needs to be growth in some of their habits and some of their details. And it's hard to talk about those guys specifically, but when good players like that, and again, these are all really good players, or they would not be in the National Hockey League, but every player can improve a little bit with their details and some of their habits. And those guys reflect our team on a whole, too. What we're trying to accomplish as a team within our daily habits, within our details, it's the same thing for these individuals. And I guess the best thing we can do for them is to communicate exactly what it looks like. Zadina's a perfect example. It was probably uncomfortable for him to be that 13th or 14th forward that day, but I thought we did a good job as a staff being very clear why. And he did leave the arena that day knowing why he was that 13th and 14th, and it's on him to improve on that, and we're in that process right now.
You answered a question very interestingly the other day. It was one of my questions during media availability and asking you about Simon Edvinsson being sent to Grand Rapids to start the season. And I guess we can kind of throw Elmer Soderblom into this mix too, because he made the roster, the 23-man roster. But you said that it's not so black and white making that opening roster on the day that the season starts, right?
Yes.
So you're on the roster for the opening day, but things can change vastly throughout the season. Just what did you mean by that exactly, and maybe why people get so worked up over the fact if somebody makes the opening day roster or not?
In the media, it's probably your job sometimes. It was literally putting in black and white in the newspaper or via social media in this day and age. There is something to making the roster on day one. I understand that. Mm-hmm. As an organization, we don't want guys yo-yoing up and down.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, we want you to be invested in where you are, whether it's Grand Rapids or obviously whether it's here. But I've never understood that you made the team on day one when you're literally working probably with 30. That's why you have an American Hockey League team. And that's what I meant. Like Simon Edmondson technically didn't make our game in day one. He could be here in a week through injuries or time, and vice versa with some of these players that are here right now. They're on our 23-man roster. They could be in Grand Rapids in a week. So it's that opening day roster. There is something to it, but I've never understood the black and white you've made the team just because of so many moving parts that go into your roster and day to day. So that's probably what I meant kind of with the opening day roster.
I know you mentioned that this might not happen by the time the puck drops on Friday night here at Little Caesars Arena, but do you have decisions on who is going to wear the A?
It's a great question. I don't mind being candid with it. Very similar to competition within our roster. We have options there. The one exciting part for me is we have a true captain in Dylan. Everyone in that locker room knows he's our captain. They look at him as our captain. He acts and handles himself like a captain. And I don't think that's the entire case for all 32 teams. So for us, that's a positive step. Now, with that said, as an assistant, what Steve did in some of these signings, yes, he filled some holes for our team defense. Yes, he filled some holes with our special teams, with those free agencies. But he was also had a vision of our leadership with those signings. And all those signings are going to be part of that leadership group. Now, we only want 2 assistants, but with that said, our leadership core could be 7, 8, 9, 10 deep, and we don't have that answer right now, and I think that's a positive. Some of those free agents, some players already from our previous team are going to take their natural progression as a leader, and I think what's even clouds it more is Angel Kopp hasn't really been in our process. He hasn't played a preseason game. He's barely been practicing with us. He's finally getting up to speed, being every day with us. So we are going to rotate assistant captains at least through the weekend. This may go on for weeks. This may go on for months. We may have settled on our 2 assistants, but we're going to take our time with that. We're still developing that leadership. I think there's a lot that goes into it. And when we're ready and we feel we have a clear answer on who those 2 assistants are, that's when we'll make that decision.
So you're going to have 2, because the Red Wings in the past have had 2 guys wear the A at home and 2 different guys wear it on the road. It would not be that kind of system where you'd actually would have 4?
I think we're comfortable. No, I think we're going to be comfortable with the 2. Now, who those 2 are. And again, for me, I think we're going to build around that leadership group enough where I think there's going to be people not wearing letters that know they're going to be leaned upon in that leadership.
You were asked this earlier today, and Sparky Anderson, the legendary Tigers manager, always said that he got a feel for what his team was going to do after 40 games. The first 40 games, he knew, okay, we could compete or it might be a long year. I know that this is your first year. You've been in the National Hockey League, but you were with an elite-level team.
Yes.
Do you have a number in mind, not for wins or anything, but where you're going to get a pretty good feel for what kind of year, how it's going to play out?
I think that's a fair question. I'd say probably the mid-season. You're probably into that 40, 41 games. I'm like fans. I understand the room for optimism. I'm optimistic too, with obviously some of the free agent signings, with the natural progression we hope and expect from some of the young, talented players. But I think there's a sense of reality too, of where we're at. We still have a long ways to go and some work to be done. So I'd say probably in that 40 game, I think that's fair. We can redo this 41 games in, and I think I think it'd be safe to say I have a better feel where I feel it's going to go.
Well, right. When you hit that 41 game mark, as soon as that game's over, we're sitting there going, okay,
Word
Derek.
ordered. Yeah, let's get it.
What kind of year is this?
He's going to ask you that game media availability.
Yes.
Be ready for that question.
Marking my calendar.
I promise.
Okay. I have 2 fun questions to wrap this up. Number 1. I know you're a big sweater guy. Love your sweaters.
Yes.
We're having a huge red carpet event. It's coming back for opening night on Friday.
Yes.
Have you picked out your opening day sweater yet?
I think it was more picked out for me.
Oh, okay.
I've already had a couple jabs from Alex Tanguay. I was giving a beautiful sweater, a Grayson. Is it Grayson, the company? But it has the burnt-in logo like this.
Oh, wow.
It's comfortable. I love it. The problem is I've wore it 8 games in a row. So
Mm-hmm.
again, I think the boys are on to the lack of NHL head coach depth I have in my wardrobe. So that'll be worn that day. That'll be worn the next day. It'll probably be worn on Tuesday until I get something to replace that.
Okay, and last question. Are you more nervous for your first night as an NHL head coach or for the Bills to head to Arrowhead this weekend?
The Bills. Growing up, I was passionate about two teams: the Montreal Expos. That's not going very well for me.
Great
right
uniform.
now. Yes,
though.
I loved it, and the Buffalo Bills. I never really had a hockey team. I was more into individuals back in the day. I liked John Van Beesbrook. I liked Mike Richter, smaller goalies back in the day. But the Buffalo Bills, man, maybe it's the emotional roller coaster I've lived with them. I take my Buffalo Bills. My family just rolls their eyes at me. I am more worried about my Buffalo Bills in Game 6 of the regular season than probably the nerves for Game 1 in the National Hockey League.
I love the honesty. I love the honesty. Derek, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
And good luck this weekend.
Thank you.
Thank all of you for tuning in to another edition of The Word on Woodward. We'll see you next time.